A ceasefire is announced in the Middle East. Assalamu alaikum, this is Hena Zuberi and you're watching Muslim Network News. Tonight we're going to start our coverage of the Israeli aggression on Palestine with breaking news. Israel has agreed to stop bombing Gaza and Hamas has agreed to stop firing rockets. The ceasefire will take effect on Friday morning. 11 days of fighting left about 250 people dead, including 10 Israelis. It destroyed 22 media offices and 17 hospitals and clinics in the occupied Gaza Strip. Israeli bombing also displaced 72,000 people. At this moment, it is not clear if the understanding includes stopping the forced removal of Palestinians from their homes in Jerusalem. In the days leading to this ceasefire, Palestinian authorities reported that Israeli bombing has killed 227 people in Gaza, including 64 children. Bombing has injured 1,620 people. Israel has also killed 27 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, where there are no Hamas rockets. 12 people have been killed by rockets fired from Gaza. At least 20 buildings used by local Gazan journalists have been leveled by Israeli missiles. A report by The Intercept highlights the story of Palestinian journalist Mccarthy, who has twice been a victim of Israeli attacks. He was a 21-year-old video journalist when an Israeli airstrike blew off his legs in 2008. He continued working as a journalist from his wheelchair. Mccarthy's work appeared internationally in media and exhibitions. He formed a company called Idea Media. All that was blown up last week by Israel's airstrike, and his life's work was wiped out. Mccarthy's story is only one of the 20 such journalists whose voices have been silenced. Activists say that Israel targets journalists so that no one can report what is happening in Gaza. Last week, it blew up the building housing the offices of the Associated Press, one of the world's oldest news agencies. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the United States has raised the issue with the Israeli government. Israel is protesting China's reporting of Jewish influence on American policy. Chinese media has been saying successful Jewish business people have too much sway over U.S. foreign policy. In a video posted to its Twitter account on Tuesday, the overseas arm of China's Central TV weighed in on the issue. It asked why the United States has defended Israel in its assault over Palestinians over the last few weeks. The video said, quote unquote, Jews dominate finance, media, and the internet in the United States, and asked, so do they have the powerful lobby, unquote. The Israeli embassy in Beijing said that it was disappointed to see these types of messages. It said it hoped CGTN would take down these insulting videos that spread lies and racism. Activists commented on Chinese media's duplicitous concern for Muslims in Palestine while committing genocide against Muslims in East Turkestan. At least 100 new WhatsApp groups and about 20 Telegram channels have been formed in Israel to commit violence against Palestinians. This is according to an analysis by the New York Times. Some names of these groups include Death to Arabs, the Jewish Guard, and the Revenge Troops. Local authorities have linked them to dozens of violent incidents against Palestinians who are citizens of Israel. Researchers the New York Times interviewed said that they have seen people not only planning specific action against Palestinians, but also executing the plans. In one WhatsApp group, people shared instructions on how to make Molotov cocktails and improvised explosives. In a Telegram channel with 400 or so members, the Times saw administrators asking for the addresses of Arab-owned businesses. This is not the first time social media has been used to fuel violence. Over 2 years ago, Hindu extremists have plotted attacks on Muslims in India via WhatsApp. WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. Speaking of India, officials in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh have bulldozed a 100-year-old mosque. The Gharib Nawaz Al Maroof Mosque in the state's Barabanki district was demolished on Monday evening by the local administration. Hundreds of policemen surrounded the area to prevent protests by Muslim community that prays in the mosque. Uttar Pradesh is India's most populous state with nearly 220 million residents. It has been governed by the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP. Its chief minister is a controversial saffron-robed Hindu monk named Yogi Adityanath. Adityanath is known for his anti-Muslim hate speech. The Sunni Central Waqf Board of Uttar Pradesh, which looks after mosques and other community assets in the state, condemned the demolition. It said it was done in defiance of a court order to halt demolitions of alleged illegal structures until May 31st in view of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Waqf Board added that it will appeal to higher courts to stop the action. A Tennessee man who harassed two teenage Muslim girls and then swung a knife at their father has pleaded guilty to a federal hate crime. The U.S. Justice Department said on Monday that Christopher Beckham of Nashville appeared in court last week to enter the plea. Beckham pleaded guilty to violating the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. Beckham admitted that he confronted the two sisters in hijab after they got off a school bus in 2017. He yelled, "Allahu Akbar," and "Go back to your country." When their father arrived to pick them up, Beckham injured him by swinging a knife and punching him. When their mother arrived with another child in the car, Beckham had his knife drawn and chased after them as well. After police took Beckham into custody, he called the family terrorists and vowed to kill them. When he got out of jail, the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, issued a statement. It said that the plea was welcomed as an indication that our system of justice can work for those who are targeted by hatred and bigotry, even if it takes years. U.S. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy tried to change rules about wearing masks in the House of Representatives. His attempt to have members be maskless was blocked by House Democrats on Wednesday evening. The vote for masks in the House was 218 to 210. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi came to the floor to add her vote to the tally. McCarthy argued that fully vaccinated individuals should not have to wear masks in accordance to guidance by the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC said on May 13th that Americans who are fully vaccinated do not have to be masked in most situations. Mask wearing in the halls of Congress has become a growing flashpoint amongst its members. In other Congress-related news, House passed a bill with 364 to 62 votes to address the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes. The Senate passed the legislation in a 94-1 vote last month. It directs the U.S. Department of Justice to expedite the review of COVID-related hate crimes that were reported to law enforcement agencies. The law would establish ways for the department to report such incidents online and perform public outreach. The legislation will go to the president for his signature next. A 107-year-old survivor of the 1921 Oklahoma race massacre is seeking justice. Yesterday, Viola Fletcher and her younger brother, Hugh Van Ellis, who is 100 years old, testified at a House Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee hearing in Congress. This was held to mark the upcoming centennial of the massacre. On May 31, 1921, a mob of white Tulsa, Oklahoma residents, with the support of law enforcement, attacked and burnt an area in the city known as the Black Wall Street. Homes and businesses in the affluent Greenwood district were burnt to the ground. Thousands of African Americans were forced to homelessness after fleeing their residence. No one was ever charged for the crime. Yesterday's hearing was called so that survivors and descendants could share testimony. This may result in compensation in the future. The survivors who testified demanded justice and accountability for the massacre, as well as reparations to be paid. AT&T has announced a $43 billion deal that will merge its Warner Media Group with its rival, Discovery. This will combine the likes of HBO, Warner Brothers Studios, CNN, and other cable channels such as HGTV, the Food Network, and OWN. The move is expected to pave the way for one of Hollywood's biggest studios to compete with media giants like Netflix and Disney. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, walking up and down the world's largest refugee camps. I met Sister Fatima. Well, I'm calling her a sister. She was just a teenage girl, my granddaughter's age. Her parents were slaughtered by the Burmese military, and she was dragged by the Burmese soldiers to their hut, and all night long she was violated. She lost consciousness. When she regained, and in the morning and soldiers were themselves away, she ran and hid in a vegetable patch. Some people saw her, gave her clothes, and took her 4-day-long walk to Bangladesh. Who will speak up for her? Who will stand up for her if not you and I? It's our responsibility. It's our duty, brothers and sisters in humanity. And that's why I like you to support Burma Task Force. I'm a volunteer for it. But Burma Task Force is standing up to stop this genocide, violation of our sisters. You and I are free, they are not. Please stand up, work with Burma Task Force, and donate today to Burma Task Force. Together, we can do it. Assalamu alaikum.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. President Joe Biden plans to spend more than $2 trillion to overhaul the nation's aging infrastructure. But progressive politicians and climate groups say Biden's plan falls far short of the Green New Deal. Biden's plan, they say, doesn't dedicate enough money that is needed. To discuss this in detail, let's go over to Saliha Farouk. Over to you, Saliha.
Once again, thank you, Hena. I really do appreciate that. Today, we're quite honored to be speaking with Professor Robert Pollin, a distinguished professor of economics, as well as the co-chair of the Political Economy Research Institute. Professor Robert, thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm very happy to be on. Thank you.
Our pleasure. So you might know, of course, that right now in the United States, carbon emissions had risen by around 3.4% last year and by about 2.7% globally. If you could talk to us a little bit about how Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan, of course, redefines not just what kind of new infrastructure that can be included in the United States, but also how this new plan can expand the scope of what is possible to be achieved, especially in terms of building back better and also being more sustainable.
So the Biden plan is quite ambitious relative to where we were under Trump, which was, of course, a climate denier altogether and not achieving anything. So the Biden proposal, as you said, it's $2.3 trillion over 8 years. So that's about a little less than 300 billion a year. But it includes a lot of things other than climate investments. It includes things in traditional infrastructure such as roads, dams, water systems, and it includes building universal broadband. The amount that would go to clean energy investments and other things that will reduce emissions, by my estimate, is in the range, is about a third. So it would be about $100 billion per year over 8 years. That is not adequate for achieving the Biden administration's own emission reduction targets. It helps, it gets us a long way. Over the next 10 years, my estimate is we probably, as an economy overall, have to spend about $500 billion a year. So the Biden administration gets us to 100. If that works to incentivize private investments with the other 400 billion, then we're in reasonable shape. But it certainly is a step in the right direction.
Incredibly fascinating. Thank you so much for that. And when it comes to this new infrastructure plan that you're elaborating on here, how does it, in your professional opinion, relate to the Green New Deal? And in your perspective, what kind of social as well as environmental problems is the Green New Deal addressing or attempting to address in the United States?
Well, of course, it depends on what one defines as the Green New Deal. So I'll just work from my own definition. There's a lot of others. In my opinion, the Green New Deal is fundamentally a project to control climate destruction, to stabilize the climate, and to do it in a way that generates a lot of jobs, makes them good jobs, and that also provides transitional support for workers and communities that will be negatively impacted. The workers and communities that right now depend on coal, oil, and natural gas for their livelihoods. So in my opinion, that's the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal, this idea of a Green New Deal is consistent with what's in the Biden, so-called the Biden jobs program. The Green New Deal, as I just mentioned before, the level of spending for investing in building renewable solar, wind, geothermal power, raising energy efficiency standards, providing that the jobs are good jobs, addressing the communities that have been most negatively impacted by the fossil fuel industry and those that are most dependent on the fossil fuel industry. All of that goes into the Green New Deal. And that's when I said we're looking at, say, $500 billion per year for the next decade. To me, that's the core of the Green New Deal.
Okay. Now, the infrastructure proposal here plans to also help the economy in terms of, for example, COVID recovery, childcare, as well as education. When it comes to using this ambitious plan, how can the United States government design its upcoming infrastructure in a way that meets this new economy plan that the Biden administration is calling for?
Okay, so it's gotten a bit confusing because actually Biden has three proposals, one of which is passed. That's the American Rescue Plan. That's the one that is most focused on recovery from COVID. It's a short-term plan. That's about $2 trillion right there to spend over the next year or so. The American Jobs Plan is the one that includes the investments in clean economy, climate stabilization, but also traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, waterways, and broadband. And then the third proposal that he came up with about a week and a half ago, the American Families Plan, that's another $2 trillion or thereabouts. And that is focused on childcare, family leave policy, preschool education. So altogether, you're really looking at about $6 trillion if we merged all three programs.
I really appreciate you going into all of the different plans, breaking them down, and explaining some of their focus areas there. Now, do you feel like there's this ambition relationship between, as you're saying, climate mitigation, social equity, as well as economic opportunity? And when it comes to trying to reach goals in all of these respective roadmaps, can we expect any kind of positive outlook or expectancy behind these goals to quote unquote build back better?
Well, I think that Biden's proposals, taken as a whole, are very ambitious. To me, on balance, they're positive. They're certainly pushing in the right direction. They are definitely addressing the climate crisis. They are addressing other infrastructure needs. They are addressing the support for families in significant ways, unprecedented in the United States, although in other countries have paid family leave, have universal child care, and so forth. We don't. So Biden is pushing on all of these fronts. It will address the massive inequality that is built up in the country for the last 40 years, really. The investments in all of the areas will create jobs. So investments to build a clean economy will create jobs for construction workers, for manufacturing, for truck drivers, for administrative staff. The critical question there is, okay, what is the quality of the job? Are they going to be good jobs? And that therefore we need to also include into the Green New Deal support for labor organizing and affirmative action for people of color and women that have been historically excluded from a lot of the job categories that are going to be expanding under this investment program.
Now, when it comes to looking at things from an environmental perspective, perhaps many of us might be wondering, won't building new infrastructure bring about greenhouse gas emissions? And in this regard, does the series of plans conflict with this idea of a Green New Deal? And in your opinion, do the end goals here outweigh all of these risk factors which Americans might have to experience in the meantime?
Mm-hmm. So, of course, building anything entails using materials, and to get materials, you create emissions. The primary way through which emissions are generated that are causing the climate crisis is burning oil, coal, and natural gas. That's it. That's about 70% of all emissions. So, if we transition away from relying on burning oil, coal, and natural gas to produce energy, we can still do the manufacturing work. We can still do the construction work on a foundation of clean energy, and we are dramatically reducing emissions. So, of course, there's going to be some trade-off because, again, doing anything will entail using resources. But if we're really focused on reducing emissions and stabilizing the climate, we will get very, very far. There will be very big net positive by investing in clean energy and raising energy efficiency.
Now, from a perhaps civic engagement or societal perspective, do you think it might be a good idea for Americans, perhaps in their own way, to either participate in adding their voices to all of these collective attempts to combat environmental degradation, as well as maybe supporting the idea of saving resources and perhaps making the Green New Deal possible? Is there a way that Americans can go about doing that? Do you feel like it should be a split task between the government as well as American citizens? What's your perspective on that?
Well, let's just say nothing would have happened if it hadn't been for citizen engagement up until today. I mean, let's just look at Joe Biden himself. He doesn't have any real track record in terms of fighting for something like a Green New Deal, nor do virtually any other politicians. They're doing it because people have been committed and organizing and pushing ideas out and getting to the polls and voting and telling the stories that matter about their lives, about having clean energy, about having clean communities and clean air. And, after decades of dedicated work, these ideas have now broken through. and Biden is reflecting that. So I would say citizen action is basically everything. And yes, let's keep up citizen action along all fronts. Yes, let's elect good politicians. Let's hold their feet to the fire, but let's also organize and educate in our communities.
Much for that. And I just wonder, from your perspective in your professional field, what do you think might be realistic in terms of what you might hope to see in the future from these series of plans? What do you hope for the future? What are some perhaps recommendations that you'd like to put out there for everybody listening, as well as maybe just to the government in general?
So I'm not a climate scientist, so I can't really tell us what climate science requires in terms of stabilization, in terms of saving the planet. But if I go by very mainstream consensus views, which could be wrong, but let's say we should go from the consensus view, it tells us that we have to cut emissions by 50% by 2030. That's only 9 years from now. And we have to be at zero emissions by 2050. So I take that as that's what we've got to accomplish, period. Now, in order to get there, the fundamental project is with respect to transforming our energy system so that we don't burn oil, coal, and natural gas for energy. We rely on renewable energy and high efficiency. Now, in addition, I said before that 70% of emissions come from burning fossil fuels. The other 30% comes from destroying rainforests and from relying on industrial agriculture that is heavily dependent on nitrogen fertilizer that releases greenhouse gas emissions. So we also have to transform our agricultural system. Those are the two big projects out there, and our politics have to support projects of transformation, both in the energy system and agriculture.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Professor Robert Pollin, Distinguished Professor of Economics from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Our pleasure. Wonderful. I wanted to thank our viewers for tuning in today and heading back to the newsroom with Hena Zuberi.
Thank you, Saleha and Professor Pollin. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
Friends, our world is pulling together like never before. We're making huge sacrifices to keep one another safe. Scientists are working non-stop to develop COVID-19 vaccines and treatments. A vaccine will get our economies moving. It will tell our loved ones we're safe again. But we have challenges we must address. Right now, huge pharmaceutical companies are keeping the vaccine research a secret. They're deciding how many vaccines get made, how much to charge for them, and who gets vaccinated. This will no doubt leave billions of people behind. Pharma companies are putting profit, not people, first. Yet, billions of dollars of taxpayers' money is funding their work. We cannot let the CEOs of a handful of pharmaceutical companies decide our future. We need a vaccine that everyone can have free of charge, no matter where you live or whether you're rich or you're poor. We need companies to share all their research so we can make enough safe vaccines for everyone. We need a vaccine owned by all of us. To end this COVID-19 pandemic, we need to pull together once more.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. To get the latest updates and the situation on the ground, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, who is with Dr. Mushir Amr, an educationist from Gaza. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. I was about to do an interview with a professor in Gaza, but due to the bombing, which is ongoing, it was delayed. But now, thankfully, we are connected. Dr. Mushir Amr, welcome to Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam, rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Mushir Amr is Associate Professor at the Islamic University, Gaza. Tell us what is happening right now there.
Well, it has been really very distressing and difficult for us, for my own family, for me personally, and for the people of the Gaza Strip over the past 10 days. We have been under constant Israeli occupation, bombardment, and attacks. For me personally, I've got a family of 5 kids, and since the first day of the attack, we've been huddled in our own a flat apartment, and we keep hearing bombings and bombardment and Israeli war jets hovering around. So it's been really very distressing and difficult, because the Israeli occupation forces have been attacking civilian homes, civilian apartments, residential buildings, attacking deliberately and quite brutally civilian infrastructure. They attacked mosques, hospitals, clinics, police stations, and even they destroyed streets and roads. They cutting off roads leading to the main intersections and also leading to the main hospitals in Gaza city. So it's been really very distressing for us, including myself, because the Israeli occupation army have been targeting these homes without giving any warning in many cases. So you've got lots of people killed under the rubble of their own homes because of these missiles and because of these precision-guided bombs that raining down on people. So there is a high level of fear that you might get killed, because of a missile hitting your home, your own apartment. This is a scary scenario to find yourself in. Alhamdulillah, the people are steadfast and resilient, but the human suffering, the level and the magnitude of the human suffering and pain of the people here in Gaza is quite big, huge, because of the brutality and the viciousness of the Israeli occupation attack against the people here in Gaza.
In the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof yesterday wrote that Israel has bombed and damaged 17 hospitals and clinics. How the injured are being taken care of, because you're saying the roads are also broken. So are there other hospitals? How people are being treated?
Well, it's a quite difficult situation. You know, this is not the first Israeli aggression on Gaza. I mean, this is the fourth war on Gaza. We have every few years an Israeli massive onslaught on the Gaza Strip. So it's quite difficult. The hospitals are barely managing with this quite large number of martyrs and wounded. And amid this attack, deliberate attack on hospitals and on infrastructure such as roads and streets, it's a distressing situation, I imagine, for the medical staff in these hospitals to deal with this very large number of people amid a shortage of medical facilities and medical necessities and medicines. Remember that we've been under the toll of the coronavirus pandemic. So the hospitals are already suffering because of the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, and also because of 14 years of Israeli occupation blockade over the Gaza Strip that limited the entry of health equipment, medicines, and other necessary medical, basics and necessities. So this is a quite distressing situation for a lot of people. And on the health side, it's no secret that the situation in the health situation in Gaza is faltering because of this systematic attack against Israeli systematic attacks on the Palestinian people, including the health sector here.
So another news item says that there are 72,000 people who have to flee their homes because of bombing. So where these people are going, because Gaza is all locked in place, where are these people going to seek shelter?
Most of these people are sort of placed in shelters run and provided by the UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the UN, the main UN organization operating in the Gaza Strip. So they are sheltered in UNRWA schools, UNRWA-run schools. So the schools are turned into shelter centers. And you have lots of these families, thousands of them, are located in these areas, away from the border areas where a lot of attacks and bombardment and artillery shelling would have been taking place. They are provided with food and drink and water, but the situation is, the footage that is emerging from there, it's quite difficult. You have people, families displaced, internally displaced and relocated in these areas amid quite difficult conditions to live in these specially made shelters to spare them the horrors of Israeli attacks and the idea that they've been displaced already.
So media, of course, here has reported Associated Press and Al Jazeera building were bombed where they were for 15 years. But Intercept online journal mentions that there are 20 media operations of Gaza also has been destroyed. So how do the people in Gaza communicate with each other in the absence of their media?
This is also part of this huge and brutal Israeli attack on the people. And this includes attacking media organizations operating to cover and report on what's going on. The AP, for instance, office and the Al Jazeera office, together with other media outlets, have been attacked, or their offices have been destroyed as a result of the Israeli missile attack. We have been facing serious limitations in internet communication because of they've attacking sort of the communication infrastructure, sort of the fiber, I don't know what it's called, fiber communication lines, so that we have been facing severe sort of internet connection, slow internet connection. And I think that's one purpose of this, is to silence any voices trying to report on the savagery, on the viciousness of the Israeli attacks on the Palestinian people here in Gaza. They want the world not to know about what's being done against the Palestinian people. And there have been a lot of organizations condemning the attack on and the targeting of journalists and of media outlets. Yesterday, we've attacked a journalist, a Palestinian journalist, when he was in his own home while he was asleep. He was targeted with a missile that hit him in his own apartment. And this just tells you that journalists and reporters are also a target for the Israeli occupation, the purpose of which is to silence the truth from coming out from Gaza.
President Biden yesterday said that he expects de-escalation from Israel yesterday. Are you seeing any reduction in bombing?
Well, hopefully at some point there will be a reduction or a de-escalation in the Israeli attacks on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And there has been serious talk now as we talk about a truce, a ceasefire. When we're talking about ceasefire, we're talking about the Israelis stopping attacking the Palestinian people here. But I mean, Biden is just doing lip service about human rights, about the need to stop Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip, and this really sounds hypocritical and disingenuous when he at the same time approves the sale of precision-guided weapons worth of $735 million to Israel. So this is really paradoxical and really morally unacceptable when you are talking about stopping Israel and his rhetoric about stopping Israel, and at the same time he's providing Israel with precision-guided bombs to attack the Palestinians. This really is a testament of the kind of double standard policies and the false rhetoric he's directing to the world, and at the same time he's providing support and funding Israel's war machine against the Palestinian
You mentioned precision guided missiles. Are they really properly guided, or they are dumb machines? Because so many civilians and children. Do you think Israel is precisely targeting those civilians, or these machines are actually not that smart?
Well, I think certainly they are precision-guided bombs, but they are directed deliberately and systematically against the people. I mean, it's not they are fired indiscriminately, because they've been attacking residential buildings, and Israelis know every neighborhood in the Gaza Strip because of this, because of years of surveillance using drones and satellites. So they know all the streets, they know all the locations in the Gaza Strip. So when they attack, they know who is in that house, they know who is in that neighborhood, and yet they are willfully and deliberately attacking these houses, these apartments, these clinics, and these various locations. So I don't think that they are fired indiscriminately, but they are willfully fired against the people to exact a maximum price from the people, and also to inflict maximum pain on the Palestinian people, to force them into raising white flags. And this is the issue. And I think this is the purpose and the goal behind these systematic and deliberate attacks targeting the Palestinian civilians here in the Gaza Strip, in order to force them and to force the Palestinian resistance into raising white flags.
You're saying in one of your tweets that there is a cycle. Israel bombs and destroys infrastructure, which is funded by the United States. And then Europeans pay the bill for the reconstruction of Gaza, and then cycle repeats itself. I mean, what I noted was that America is paying for the destruction and Europeans are paying for reconstruction. Do you think Europeans are a little more kind than Americans when it comes to Palestinians?
Well, it's not really kindness. It's all it's part of the pattern that we've seen over the past years since the aggression on Gaza in the year 2008. 2009, and then we had the same thing with the aggression in 2012 and 2014, and the same pattern. This points to the hypocrisy, I believe, of the Europeans at the same time, is that they have not really led and used and adopted a position, a clear position that is in line with the international law, that is in line with the tenets of the human rights, the respect for human decency and respect for the human life. They've been really kneeling or succumbing to the American policies. They're just following the line of the American policies, and they're just providing money. But this is a kind of political money to further Israel's interest in Palestine, to sort of be in line with the American policies directed for the Palestinian vis-a-vis the Palestinian issue. So this is and believe this is an unacceptable approach by the Europeans, is that they have to pay for the reconstruction. The proper course of action should be to stop Israel's attacks, to stop Israel's colonization, to stop Israel's occupation of the Palestinian people. This is the proper approach to resolve the conflict, to resolve the issues, and to put an end to the attacks on the Palestinian people. It doesn't make any sense when the Israelis are sort of treated as, when Israel is treated as a country above the law, and it acts with impunity. And then you have the Americans and the Europeans sort of paying lip service for human rights, and while at the same time they're supporting colonial Israel in its attacks and its massacring of the Palestinian people, in its colonization and occupation of the Palestinian land. So this is really an approach, and that's why I wrote this, because it is a pattern that we have seen over the past 15 or so years, and this points to the hypocrisy and the double standard policies and the disingenuity, if I may say, of the approach they're using at the expense of Palestinian lives, at the expense of Palestinian suffering and Palestinian human rights, definitely.
Professor Amir, one question which I wonder, and many other people are asking, Israel has this cycle, but why does Hamas send rockets while it fully know that Israel going to start bombing and more Palestinian lives will be lost?
Well, I mean, I really don't like this kind of question, because it really provides a simplistic and reductionist view of what's going on. I mean, we have to really address the root issue, the root cause of all of this that is going on in occupied Palestine, including the Gaza Strip. I mean, we're talking about a situation of siege, a situation of foreign military occupation of the Palestinian land, including the Gaza Strip. We're talking about a system of brutalization, suffocating siege, ethnic cleansing, expulsion, a situation of colonial settlement. And in this kind of situation, the Palestinians, not just Hamas, the Palestinian people are retaliating. The Palestinian people are responding to this system of oppression, to this occupation. So the question should be, is that Israel must stop ut colonialism, Israel must stop its occupation and its brutalization of the Palestinian people. You can't put the Palestinians in a situation of perpetual injustice and suffering and being subjected to a brutal military occupation and expect them not to attack, not to respond, not to retaliate. So the question should be, is that Israel must stop its attacks and aggressions.
Thank you so much, Professor Mashir Amir. Thank you for your time. Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Keep watching Muslim Network TV, where we're updating you on the situation in Palestine on a daily basis. For more, visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.